What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And the New York Giants just wrapped up the 2023 NFL Draft, and boy, oh boy, did Joe Schoen do a splendid job finding a lot of talent, particularly in those first three draft picks. Now, the Giants did go out there and bolster their wide receiver core in the draft, as they tried to do all offseason long. However, there was a lot of talk going into the offseason that the Giants desperately needed a wide receiver one. They needed a primary receiving threat to take over and transcend that offense. They didn't quite find that. Now, Jalin Hyatt, very exciting talent, but is he going to be a wide receiver one the first day that he steps into the NFL? That's very, very unlikely. And you've got other guys thrown into the mix now. Paris Campbell, Darius Slayton was extended. We'll see what happens with Bryce Ford Wheaton out of West Virginia, undrafted free agent rookie. But none of these guys really scream to you WR1. Maybe there's potential down the line, but this year the Giants are probably playing without a WR1 unless they get that WR1 production from the tight end position. So that's what we're going to discuss today, how Darren Waller can really be a WR1 for the Giants offense this upcoming season, really transcend what that position means, the tight end position means to the Giants offense, and really be a dynamic game changer that propels Daniel Jones and this offense to take that next step forward as we desperately need them to, so we can continue to compete deep into the NFC postseason. So again, we're going to go ahead and discuss all of that today, but before we dive into all of that, please make sure to leave a like if you do enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. But without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And what are your thoughts on Darren Waller potentially serving as WR1 to the Giants offense?
I'm doing great, man. It's been an interesting couple of days. The Giants are bringing in a lot of, those undrafted free agents, those rookies in to help, kind of refine, see where they are, see if some of them can make the roster. They had a lot of tryouts today. So we'll see if anybody cracks, training camp and can get involved there. But, I wanted to kind of take a beat to recognize Darren Waller's value to this team for 2023. Now, if you guys don't know this, and I imagine some of you guys probably don't, so Waller's 30 years old. He's going to be 31, and he's actually on a 5-year, $50-something million deal. And ultimately, the Giants have him for 1 year at a $5 million cap hit. So I'm going to walk you through the financial allocation to Darren Waller so that we can see how his production may align with what the Giants want and how he might just be a kind of de facto WR1 for us in the interim, but long term, I think they're going to want to go for someone a lot younger. We really like Jalin Hyatt. I don't think his ceiling is elite wide receiver 1 status, but I think he can be a high-end wide receiver 2, a nice complement to a guy like a Jamar Chase or like a Justin Jefferson. Of course, finding one of those guys is a lot easier said than done. But Waller's interesting, right? He's capable of producing those elite numbers in the passing game. He's currently on a 3-year, $51 million deal that kicked in after his rookie deal expired. So that deal expires in 2027. His contract includes an out after the 2023 season, which accounts for just $7.8 million in dead salary. So Darren Waller will have about a $4.5 million cap hit for the 2023 season, which is why Joe Schoen went out and acquired him in the first place. He was like, how can we get WR1 value, WR1 production without spending a ton, without giving up premium draft capital, without signing a player to a $100 million deal? How can we get that level of production? We may have to take a gamble because Darren Waller has a lengthy injury history, but if he is healthy, we're talking about a guy that has 2 seasons with over 1,100 yards and 9 touchdowns in one of them. So, I did a little comparison to Stephon Diggs a couple years ago, and Stephon Diggs in 2021 had 1,225 receiving yards and 10 touchdowns. And then you look at Darren Waller, and he had a really similar stat line 2 seasons ago where he had 1,100 receiving yards and 9 touchdowns. So he was pretty close to what Stephon Diggs posted in one season, and he's a WR1. He's an established, known WR1 with Buffalo, with Brian Daboll's offense. So you see the comparison in numbers. They are there. Darren Waller is capable of that, and his snap distribution is also really interesting. And Anthony, I think you're going to like this a lot. He played 31.7% of his snaps from the slot, 23.1% out wide, and 44.6% in line. So they moved him all around that offense. Those are his career averages. And they kind of started to sway more toward the slot. But you can use Darren Waller in all facets of the game. And because Daniel Bellinger is a better blocker, I think we're going to see him kind of featuring this jumbo slot role. They're going to push him to the outside in specific situations. He will come from inline spots on occasion. I'd probably imagine 35% seems like a reasonable thing. But when you're looking at what the Giants can do with him, the opportunities are endless. What are your thoughts on Darren Waller, his versatility, and kind of how they may utilize him in 2023?
Yeah, so I think those career averages that you just mentioned, with in terms of how the Giants are probably going to move him around. He's going to be in line. He's going to be out wide. He's going to be in the slot. If you actually take a look back to this most recent season that Darren Waller just played with the Las Vegas Raiders, the new coaching staff led by Josh McDaniels actually used him much differently than he had throughout his career. So I'm happy that you harped on the career averages, because I think that's how the Giants will use him. I don't think they necessarily use him the way that the Raiders did last year, because they had him play 80% of his snaps between the slot and out wide positions. He was only in line as a tight end for 20% of his snaps. And in my opinion, I get that that's probably the way that you replicate WR1 production in some ways. However, I think that kind of minimizes his skill set. Darren Waller is such a true and special talent from that tight end position. He has the ability to line up all over the place, which is what makes him so special. But if he's only lining up all over the place and he's not lining up as an inline tight end, and the defense is now putting corners on him, he's not nearly as special. And I do trust Brian Daboll to utilize him correctly. I don't think Joe Schoen would have made this move without consulting Brian Daboll and coming up with a clear and cohesive plan to get him involved heavily in the New York Giants offense and get him involved creatively, especially. I think that Brian Daboll has proven to be one of the more creative play callers in the NFL, or not play callers, play designers. We know Mike Kafka was the play caller last year, and he did a great job for the majority of the season, but the two of them working in tandem really knew how to maximize the skill set of all of those players. I mean, think back to Darius Slayton. What was our opinion of him this time last year? What was our opinion of him going into training camp? We didn't even think that Darius Slayton was going to make the roster, and then he ended up having a great 2022 season as the Giants' top receiving target, and then going into this offseason, he almost got paid a big bag from multiple teams. There was a bidding war. The Giants did somehow win the bidding war and re-sign Darius Slayton, but it was very close. He almost walked away in free agency. So it just shows you what a true play caller, what a truly great offensive coach can do for a player. Like Darius Slayton, he would have had no market if he was a free agent last offseason, but this offseason, he had a big market because Brian Daboll and Mike Kafka showed how talented this player can be under the right coaching circumstances. And so just trying to apply that to Darren Waller. We've seen Darren Waller at his best, arguably a top 3 tight end in the NFL. He's the fastest tight end in the NFL. I think that's something we should harp on in this episode as well. Speed, how speed has become a massive priority for the New York Giants. But thinking about how talented this player is, now you're throwing him in the mix with two of the best offensive minds in football, in my opinion, Brian Daboll and Mike Kafka. Mike Kafka being a young, up-and-coming genius from the offensive coordinator position, and then Brian Daboll being one of the best offensive-minded head coaches in the league. That's your 2022 AP NFL Coach of the Year right there, because of how great he was leading this team, especially on the offensive side of the ball. So now you're throwing Darren Waller into this mix with this coaching staff. I think you can watch his game elevate to a new level. Again, he has to stay healthy. Huge factor there for Darren Waller. But if he does stay healthy, and you have Brian Daboll calling these plays, or Kafka calling these plays, Daboll designing them, I think you could see a huge comeback season from Darren Waller, who did have a down year last year with Josh McDaniels, but so did pretty much everybody in that offense. So when you're looking at Darren Waller now stepping into a Brian Daboll-led offense, I think there is a lot to be excited for, including his speed. The speed that he brings to the game at the tight end position, it's bar none. He's the fastest tight end in the NFL, and that's one of the reasons he is such a dynamic receiving threat and such an X factor in any offense that he plays in, why he will be in the Giants offense. But Alex, what are your thoughts on that? I know I saw you tweet something about the speed of the Giants wide receiver core, how they made it a big point of emphasis this offseason to upgrade in the speed department, and they certainly did that. Darren Waller, super fast. Jalen Hyatt, very fast. Paris Campbell, very fast. But how do you think that the speed factors into Darren Waller and what he'll be able to do in the Giants offense this year?
I mean, he is objectively a mismatch, right? Like, it depends. Who are you going to put on Darren Waller? If you're putting anybody but a cornerback on Darren Waller, they're going to get toasted. You know what I mean? Linebacker, toasted. Safety, probably going to get toasted because they're a little bit smaller and he's got that 6'6" frame. You got to put a physical cornerback on Darren Waller if you're going to stop him. Which is why when he's healthy, he's basically unguardable. He's got that speed. He's got good route running. He's got hands. You see a player with a lot of upside here. And I think that ultimately when you're looking at a player of this nature, he's a unicorn in a way. And the Giants haven't had a player like this in the receiving game in quite some time. But like I referenced earlier, the contract situation, and I want to get your take on that because it is a kind of an interesting situation when it comes to his deal, right? So as I referenced earlier, $4.5 million cap hit for the 2023 season. And if they don't cut him, if they don't release him, so they would take on $7.8 million in dead money if they do release him after this season. But he's going to be 31 years old next year, and he's going to count $14 million for the 2024 campaign, $15 million for 2025, and $17 million for 2026 when he's like 34 years old. So the Giants have an interesting situation here because either you cut him and you save a little bit of money and you have an out in the deal and you're able to recoup some of that lost guaranteed money, or you keep him and you hope to God he doesn't get healthy, it doesn't get hurt, and he stays healthy. But even with the age and whatnot, as he gets older, he's definitely going to regress in some ways. What do you think about that contract? 14 million to 15 million to 17 million. He's gonna be 34 years old by the time 2026 comes around. Do you think that they're better off moving on, or do you think there's a possibility they stick out the longevity of this deal? I guess it depends how he performs, but age definitely has to be considered here.
Age will be considered, but it definitely has to do with how well he performs, because let's say that he's the best tight end in the NFL through 2026. You're going to let him play out the contract through 2026. I mean, Darren Waller has the potential to be one of those top players at his position, but what I really want to harp on about the contract, Alex, and this has been my theme for several episodes now, I've called this the theme of the offseason: flexibility. I keep saying that word, and this contract is probably the biggest, most glaring, kind of point of emphasis to make in terms of flexibility for the New York Giants, because this was such a flexible contract. It was so flexible, in fact, that after they traded for Darren Waller, they were able to restructure that contract and make it even easier for them to inherit that deal. So I think when you look at that deal, it's a great one. The Giants clearly were looking for players who had flexible contracts all offseason long, and they found Darren Waller on the trade market. This contract is far more flexible than, say, DeAndre Hopkins, right? I know a lot of Giants fans kind of wanted to see that trade happen. Maybe New York could send the 4th or 5th round pick and acquire DeAndre Hopkins as their WR1. Well, he doesn't have nearly the same level of flexibility built into his contract that Darren Waller had. And again, when you're talking about replicating WR1 production from the tight end position, you have to do that with a flexible contract as well. Trading for DeAndre Hopkins, no flexibility in that deal. I know that he said he's flexible, but if you look at that deal, there's really not much you can do unless you extend him, and that just ties up more money down the road. Right now, the Giants, instead of going for DeAndre Hopkins, tying up a bunch of expensive, dollar amounts to a wide receiver, an aging wide receiver, they went ahead, they got Darren Waller, who has a very low cap hit and has a very flexible contract that can pretty much get out of it at any time without suffering too much of a financial penalty. So I love that deal. I think Joe Shane did a phenomenal job finding that deal, finding him on the trade market and making the move to go ahead and acquire him. And again, just having the flexibility in all of these deals this offseason. We've talked about the incentive-laden contracts. We've talked about the out in Daniel Jones's contract after 2 years, how it's only a 2-year deal for Darius Slayton, but it's really a 1-year deal. Again, incentives for Paris Campbell. It's just been a lot of flexible deals, and I'm going to continue to say flexibility is the theme of this Giants offseason: speed and flexibility. And hey, Darren Waller has both of those things in more than one way. Not only is his contract flexible, he's also very flexible on the field, can move all over the field. We know that Joe Shane, Brian Dable, Mike Kafka, they really do prioritize versatility and the ability to move all over the place. But with that being said, Alex, what are your expectations for Darren Waller this year? We're talking about wide receiver 1 production. What does that look like? What does he need to do to really fulfill that role as the WR1 in this offense from the tight end spot? What are your thoughts on that? How much does he have to do in order to fulfill that role?
Look, from Darren Waller, I'm just first and foremost, just stay healthy. That's the most important variable here, just staying on the field, because if he's on the field, he can produce. But I would say, they're also going to get Daniel Bellinger involved. You know what I mean? They want to get those two guys involved in different ways. But I would assume, a good stat line for me for Darren Waller would be about 800 yards receiving. And, it may not be WR1 production. The point here is he's capable of it. The point here is if he's healthy, he can do it. But I think where he ends up landing may be different than that. I think he ends up with about 800 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns, which is pretty good. That's solid WR2 numbers. I don't think the Giants necessarily have their WR1 right now. I think best case scenario, he has 1,000 yards and 10 scores, and we're damn, that was a sick season, and he was awesome for us. That would be the best case scenario. But I think being a bit more realistic, I would recommend tempering your expectations. And that's where I would say 800 yards, 6 scores. That's what I think is a good number to land at. So he's averaging around 50 yards a game, gets a touchdown every 3 games or so. And I feel good about that. And it kind of gives you that buffer. The Giants needed to upgrade a lot of positions this year, right? Trading a third-round pick for a $4.5 million cap hit for a player who's capable of WR1 numbers is objectively a good risk. I do think that in the future, next year potentially, the Giants may be looking for that last WR1 piece. You get your cornerback in Deonte Banks, you extend Dexter Lawrence yesterday, you have a couple more big decisions to make. Maybe you keep Saquon on a multi-year deal, you have Daniel Jones locked up, you got Andrew Thomas on his 5th-year option, you got a lot of pillars and keys on this team already established and here for the long term. So then you can start to say, okay, our key positions are locked. Our tackles are good. Our OLBs are good. Our interior defense is good. We have a good linebacker in Okereke. We have Deonte Banks. The question is, what happens to Adoree Jackson? Maybe they extend him, or maybe they go out and find a different cornerback. Who knows? That's another problem for another day. But you're looking at the team and we're saying, okay, like we have a lot of good players now. Now maybe we're 1 or 2 pieces away. Maybe we're 1, 2, 3 pieces away. What do you think about that? Do you think that this team is heading in the direction where we can take that risk for a WR1 in the future, where then we can let Darren Waller's contract go, save the money, and reallocate that toward a more prominent pass catcher?
Well, listen, I think that's a good point to bring up, that the Giants are positioning themselves to be one piece away, and that really ties into almost every episode that we've recorded this week. So if you're not caught up on your Fireside Giants, make sure to go click onto the channel, go listen to the other episodes, because we talked about the salary cap health and how the Giants have so much flexibility, there's that word again, in the future to really inherit whatever contract they so please. So yes, I do think that they've put themselves in a position where, okay, Darren Waller can be the WR1 production this year, give you at least 800 receiving yards. I think that was a good, kind of general number that you threw out there, Alex. But let's say that next year they're like, we still do need a wide receiver 1. Let's either trade up. We've got the assets. We're a winning football team. Let's trade up, draft a receiver, or let's trade some draft assets and go ahead and get somebody who, maybe has a really big contract or is about to get paid on a contract year. There's plenty of options out there for the Giants. I know a lot of Giants fans really wanted Brandon Ayuk this offseason. I think that the 49ers are content to let him play out the final year of his deal. But what if he hits the free agency market? Or what if they franchise tag him? Well, you can go ahead and trade for him. You can go ahead and sign him in free agency. The Giants have the money to do that. And we're talking about how good this offense can be with Darren Waller playing that WR1 production role from the tight end spot, right? Just imagine how good this offense can be with Darren Waller plus a wide receiver 1 in the offense. Now that sounds very scary. That sounds like something that will actually oppose the Philadelphia Eagles, the Dallas Cowboys, and all the other heavy hitting teams like the San Francisco 49ers and so on in the NFC. That could be something special right there if the Giants are able to pair Darren Waller with a WR1 and also maintain good production out of Saquon Barkley and everybody else. So, I do think that the Giants are in position here where this year they patched up the offense the best that they could with what they had. Darren Waller hopefully has a really good year. I think there is a chance he's a 1,000-yard receiver, but in all likelihood, probably 800 to 900 yards. And that's solid production from a tight end. That's great production from a tight end. And then you can go off into next year and hopefully build on that success, attract some big name star at the wide receiver position, and boom. Now you're talking about the New York Giants hopefully having one of the best offenses in the NFL. So that's really what I'm dreaming of. I will be dreaming of that all offseason long, all season long even, but I'm really just excited to see what Darren Waller can do for the New York Giants in 2023 and hopefully for many more years to come. I am super excited about him being on the team. Love that trade. Know many of you love the trade as well, but let us know what your thoughts are on Darren Waller potentially serving as the WR1 to the offense down below in the comment section. And again, if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new, ring the bell so you do not miss an episode. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Without further ado, we will catch you all in the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.
TVSO.